Good evening, and it's good to have you join us on what promises to be another exciting episode of Report Desk Africa, or as we call it here in the studio, RDA. This is where you get to see the latest stories or the most interesting stories across the continent of Africa as the week has been progressing. If you don't know me before now, my name is Bernard Akede. Or because we will be talking French, je m'appelle Bernard Akede.
Okay, I'm not part of that. My name is Blessings Wasugu. And of course, there is no doubt that today's episode, just like every other episode, is going to be insightful as we'll be taking you through stories making headlines in the African continent. And before we begin, let's take a look at this report.
Burkina Faso, we're going to be looking at the coup that took place in Burkina Faso, some of the things that happened there, why the coup took place. We'll also be looking at Burkina celebrates in response to the president's removal, and what the African Union and ECOWAS have been doing about it. That's part of what we'll be talking about today on the show. Also, we'll be looking at a topic that is quite serious. We'll be looking at cyberbullying. The Nations Cup has come. It's still ongoing anyway. There have been interesting things to talk about in the Nations Cup, but also there have been some sad moments where certain players, certain coaches, certain managers, and their relatives, friends, and family members have been targeted, bullied, and even threatened. These are some of the things that we'll be looking at today on Report Desk Africa.
All right, so stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short break.
Thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining, this is Report Desk Africa, where we run you through some of the most interesting stories across the continent during the week. Now, we will be starting off in West Africa, and we're going straight to Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, to be precise, where the army's removal and detention of President Roch Kabore, after 2 days of unrest, have sparked some sort of celebration among the anti-government protesters and international concern after what was the fourth military coup in West Africa and Central Africa in the past 1 year. We'll take this report that explains more about this coup and what's been happening in Ouagadougou.
The continued killings of civilians and military officials have triggered demonstrations across Burkina Faso, as nearly 1.5 million people have been displaced and 2,000 people killed, including 50 security forces, since the insurgency started. A few days ago, the sound of tear gas fired at protesters by security forces filled the air in Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, over citizens' dissatisfaction of President Kabore's inability to control the jihadist insurgency that has troubled the country for 7 years.
On a assez vu, on veut plus les pleurs, on veut plus les orphelins, on veut plus les veuves. Tellement, sortez-vous du sauver. Il n'a qu'à partir. On soutient les soldats. On soutient les soldats qui ne se laissent pas faire. On a entendu dire que l'armée veut prendre le pouvoir, mais nous on est avec l'armée. Demain, après-demain, même demain, on est avec l'armée. On veut qu'elle leur démissionne.
However, the military has now taken over firmly as soldiers revolt around the country, demanding better means to fight the militant in the country's north and east. The military further came up with the announcement that ended all speculations while reassuring Burkinabés of dealing with the situation.
Plan qui regroupe toutes les composantes des forces de défense et de sécurité a ainsi décidé de mettre fin au pouvoir de M. Roch Christian Kabore ce 24 janvier 2022. Une décision prise dans le seul but de permettre à notre pays de se remettre sur le bon chemin et de rassembler toutes ses forces afin de lutter pour son intégrité territoriale, son redressement et sa souveraineté.
The military takeover in the country may be a step back for democracy in West Africa that has seen 3 successive coups, one in Guinea, the other in Mali, and now in Burkina Faso. But for many in the country, it is seen as a right step in the right direction. Omolola Ololade reporting for News Central.
All right, there you have it, the unrest in Burkina Faso and the military takeover. Now, it really has been an interesting turn of event, how the democratically elected president, Roch Marc Christian Kabore, has now been overthrown and on top of that, put in house arrest by the military. And supposedly, it seems like the citizens are also happy to see that this is happening. And why is that? Because they feel like he wasn't up to the task when it came to, quelling the unrest caused by jihadists and the attacks and, various people dying and all of that. So today we'll be joined by our journalist from Burkina Faso, who is Aziz Banse. Thank you very much for joining us, Aziz.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam.
Okay, so without wasting much time, let's go into it. Now, a group of soldiers that we know as the Patriotic Movement for Safeguarding and Restoration appeared on state television and declared that they are now in control of the country. As a journalist who is following the situation of things in Burkina Faso, what exactly is your reaction to the military takeover in the country?
Okay, so thank you once more. Thank you once more. In fact, the situation we are living right now is not a surprise because it is due to many things that happened during the year 2021. Well, it started in 2015 until 2021, where the situation of the country was not easy. The country was more or less we witnessed some war and terrorist attack, corruption. So the country was living in a bad situation. That's why, militaries have decided to take the power.
Okay, Mr. Banse, now we just watched on screen now how the reaction of the ordinary Burkinabés in Ouagadougou in the reports we saw earlier. And it seems that, they were in support of the coup. From what we were made to understand, there were protests in the days before this coup took place. Now, does this mean that the people in Ouagadougou and other parts of Burkina Faso, they are happy about the presence of the military over President Kabore's reign? And what does this say about, the period that President Kabore has been ruling for? Does it mean that the people were not happy while he was ruling and now they are happy that the military is there? Why are they celebrating?
Yes, of course. Since the mandate of the President Roch Marc Christian Kabore, the Burkinabe people, they do not see any change in their daily life, in their daily activities. So, previously, they have started demonstrating, showing the disapproval, showing the anger. Well, and this is this is a kind of combination of anger, that they have decided, to call the army into the power. And if you do remember very well, on November the 22nd, we had a demonstration in Ouagadougou where the police has been, the police were not against that. The police arrested people. Well, they were not up. They were, the people were frustrated, and then the policemen, they cut people, and then they were not happy. And 2 months after, the same scenario happened, and now things were so well, and the military now took the power. In fact, the majority of the Burkinabe were not happy about the situation, and we can see things, in the daily activities, in the daily life.
Now, Aziz, talking about arresting people, we understand that Kabore unfortunately had a suspicion about the military before time. There was a time he was afraid they were becoming too powerful and he ordered the arrest of some top military officials. But unfortunately, he could not stop this coup from happening. So it seemed like there was actually a writing on the wall for a long time now. Did you see this coming?
Yes, of course. Even the analysts, many analysts have seen this thing happening. And then, the indicators, were really showing that, President Kabore will not finish his mandate. And let's say even in 10 days or a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, a soldier, a head of soldier has been caught because he was, people think that he was preparing a coup against the power of Kabore. His name is Lieutenant Zungrana. he has been caught, and then, well, from that period, tension was very high.
Okay.
And then, well, they are.
All right, Aziz. Now we've seen that there's been a lot of military coups recently. I mean, there has been Guinea, the other one in Mali, in Sudan, and now Burkina Faso. Does it mean that there is like a contagion of coup in this region, or is it that one country's resilience is sparking up the other country's protest, or what exactly is happening?
Well, in fact, the case of Guinea and Mali, well, they set as good examples for most of the people in Burkina Faso, because when taking the case of Assimi Goïta from Mali, well, in less than 2 years, he has got a lot of results, and then the terrorists there were starting flying from Mali. And then looking at these results, well, the Burkinabe people also are living more or less the same situation. Well, so there is a kind of contamination between the coup in, let's say, in Mali and Guinea, and now is from Burkina Faso. And then, to tell you the truth, many people are happy for that, because they are starting hoping for them. Hope is still now.
Okay, so Aziz, do you think that the military takeover in other countries is what is giving these other countries the wings to fly on?
Yes, of course. Because if your neighbor works very well, you can just take an example for him and then do it in your own way. Yeah, and then let's say again the situation between let's say the relation between Burkina Faso and France were not so at the top. People are very angry about the France relation between them and Burkina Faso. And then, when the military took the power, it was kind of satisfaction from them. And secondly, after the sanction taken by ECOWAS due to Mali, the young people of Burkina Faso, they were revolted. They say this is not fair, and they are demonstrating, showing their love to the soldiers of Mali. And then why not the soldiers also of Burkina Faso? Are they in this same situation? Well, this may be considered as, let's say, an example also for them, so to do the coup.
Now, speaking about ECOWAS and African Union and sanctions, now we've seen sanctions that have been imposed on the military junta, the military rulers in countries like Guinea and recently in Mali. But still, this didn't stop the military from taking over and from plotting this coup in Burkina Faso. So do do these embargoes and sanctions imposed by African Union and ECOWAS, do they really work, to make sure that other countries don't take power by force? Sanctions by these regional bodies, is it really working?
Yes, in fact, the sanction here, the people do not care about the sanction, and they take the ECOWAS as a kind of organization of presidents. If not the decision the presidents have taken in Accra to sanction the Mali people in Africa, in Burkina Faso, namely, they were not so happy. So, what about the sanction? Mali is still funding its own way. Yeah, this is also an inspiration for the people, for the people of Burkina Faso to do the same. That is, sanction or not sanction. For many people, the coup is welcome.
Okay, and before we let you go, Aziz, could you tell us what the situation is like presently in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou and other parts of Burkina Faso? What's the situation like now? Are the people scared? Are they free going about their daily businesses? Are they happy? Or is there some kind of restriction or curfew or embargo? What's the situation like?
Yes, in fact, many things happen here, and then life is still going on. There is no, there is no frustration. In fact, even let's say the second day after the coup, activities were going on well without any problem. Works, activities, banks were working without any problem. And once the new leaders of the country, the militaries, once they take the power, they started yesterday organizing consultation meetings with militaries. After militaries, they have seen the trade union. At the trade union, even yesterday, they have called the former government for a kind of discussion and prevent them not to leave the country. They are trying to organize themselves step by step so that the country will go on. And I can tell you the truth right now. Things are going well. Despite the school has been closed from Monday. Monday to Saturday, but the school will resume next Monday. So if not, things are going well here in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
All right. Thank you so much, Aziz Banse, for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
You're welcome, you're welcome. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir, à la prochaine. Bye.
Yes,
Au
I would
revoir.
speak French, but I have no idea what that is.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
I would love to have conversed with him in French if I knew how to speak French very well.
Right? You
But
just
the
end up
interesting-
implicating yourself.
Yeah, I understand. The interesting thing about this school now, like he clearly said, is that, normal life is going on. Everybody's
Yeah.
still going about their daily business, except for schools that have been closed for a week and they will reopen on Monday.
And it really is an issue of concern. I mean, 4 different military coups in 6 months. It definitely is a trigger. And I also read somewhere that Burkina Faso says they are ready for whatever sanctions the EU wants to impose on them. I mean, seeing how the same thing applied for Mali. So it's like I said earlier, it's like one country is giving the other country wings to fly. It's
Very
just
true.
like it's
Very true.
triggering the agitation.
Yeah, it is triggering agitation. So, some of the countries are beginning to learn from what their predecessors, so to speak, in Coup have gone through. The first country must have suffered some kind of sanctions, may have been an issue. The second country learned from those sanctions. The third learning further, and now Burkina Faso has learned more. Like he said, they're prepared for whatever sanctions will come.
Yeah, and it's making them more dogged.
Yeah, but the question now is, these coups have happened in Francophone Africa. Should the English-speaking countries be scared? English-speaking countries in West Africa, e.g. Nigeria, Ghana, Zambia, should we be scared? So Zambia is not in West Africa,
you
but...
speak French, so I should be asking you.
Asseyez-vous. Anyway, we'll be going on a quick break, and when we come back, the show still continues. Now we'll be talking about something very, very interesting, and that might even interest the young ones. We're talking about cyberbullying. When you pick up your phone, your device, you go online, and then somebody from somewhere you do not know begins to bully you and even threaten you. In the past few days, Africa has seen that a lot. Players in the African Cup of Nations 2021 have seen that a lot, and that is what we'll be talking about. Stay with us. It's Report Desk Africa.
Many thanks for staying with us. It's still Report Desk Africa, and right now we'll be talking about cyberbullying, which has become a critical issue in our society, especially as individuals of all ages who are vulnerable to this menace. I mean, once you're online, you are susceptible to being cyberbullied or bullied on social media, which shouldn't be so. Now, there are several cases of cyberbullying. One that readily comes to mind, which is the recent bullying of some AFCON players and their relatives on social media for not meeting expectations during the tournament. Now, this is very disturbing. And what struck me is that Nigeria played with Ghana and won. Nigeria played with Egypt and won, played with Sudan and won. Even Guinea-Bissau, who says they would rather see Nigeria die than win, Nigeria won. But then the accolades were not as much as the criticisms that came after they played with one other country, Tunisia, and lost. So it really is concerning. I mean, the cyberspace has become very toxic, especially seeing how it's filled with a lot of faceless people who say so many things and get away with it. And this has a lot of ripple effect on people, and it cannot be overlooked, especially as it affects the mental, social, and psychological effect of the person being bullied. We'll take the report now, and we'll be right back.
Nigeria's Super Eagles goalkeeper, Madoka Okoye, trended on social media for his good looks at the beginning of the Nations Cup tournament. But following the goal he conceded, which led to the exit of the team against Tunisia, the 22-year-old became a victim of cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying, to put it in that context, is a form of bullying or harassment that happens through electronic or digital means, either with the use of phones or computers or any other related means.
Sometimes, the victims are not the only ones threatened or bullied. It extends to their relatives and friends. Former Super Eagles captain J.J. Okocha was also threatened when Nigeria got knocked out after his nephew, Alex Iwobi, was given the marching orders following a needless tackle. In Freetown, angry fans were stopped from destroying the house of Sierra Leone star striker K. Kamara after he missed a crucial penalty as the Leone Stars crashed out of the AFCON 2021. Like Madoka Okoye, many victims have either deactivated comments on their social media handles or completely left certain social media platforms.
Obviously, when you're an investigative journalist and you tell stories that people don't necessarily want to be told, it causes problems. So as a result of those problems that it causes, people come after you in all sorts of ways. People have tried to use uh, things my personal life against me. They constantly make references to my divorce, for example. But first of all, I learned to restrict the amount of time that I interact with the social media world.
The effect of cyberbullying is highly, highly enormous. It can lead to low self-esteem, on the victim. And then another one is the fact that the victim tend to withdraw either from family and then trying to spend time alone. Because some of the things that happen is that the bully try as much as possible to render the person who is the victim now, either psychologically, emotionally, or even in quote, physically, because
Questions are now being asked about what can and should be done to protect people from social media bullying and deter others from engaging in the act.
or any form of threat that affects the overall health condition of any human being is a threat and it's a crime in one way or the other. So cyberbullying itself is a criminal offense. And in our country, I think a lot should be looked into it.
Issues like these are part of the reason why governments of some countries put heavy restrictions on social media, and with Nigeria just coming out of one of such restrictions, discussions surrounding social media regulation are not far away. Bernard Akede, News Central Lagos.
Cyberbullying, social media threatening. This is something that many of us have witnessed. And joining us now on Report Desk Africa is one of the faces you saw in that report. He's an investigative journalist. He's been here before. David Hundeyi is the one who's joining us. David, it's good to see you this evening.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for joining us, David.
All right, now, David, some have said that social media bullying is just bants, empty threats online. We've spoken about this earlier before the show, but we'd like you to bring this, to light again. Now, as someone who has been a victim severally, not just once, do you think that it should be taken more seriously than we take it? We know in the Western world, it's a serious offense, it's a serious crime, depending on what the bully says, what he or she says or does, and how far they go. But in this part of the world, some people call it bants, some people say it's just jokes or empty threats that should be overlooked. What do you think?
So I think we need to develop a system for very carefully demarcating what can be classified as bans, quote unquote, and as actual bullying. And the reason I'm very insistent that we need to be careful about this conversation is in a place like Nigeria, where, for example, we're just coming out of a Twitter ban that was illegally imposed by the government. In countries like this, where we are constantly at risk of overreach by the states, even though bullying on social media is a problem, it absolutely is a problem. On the other hand, you don't want to give the government the power to tackle certain things in certain ways, because you will end up with unintended consequences. You end up with a government that will use that power politically. That's what we're trying to avoid. So yes, there has to be a way to make sure that people who, especially people who take things that happen online and take those things offline. So, for example, in the reports that was playing just now, the example of the Sierra Leonean striker K. Kamara, where angry fans moved off Twitter and went to try to burn down his house, and police had to get involved. That sort of thing obviously has to be very, very decisively dealt with. Or if it's just things happening on Twitter, people saying things, these things can be very unkind. And as a regular victim of cyberbullying myself, I have a very good idea of how painful these things can be. But at the same time, you have to be careful not to unintentionally shoot yourself in the foot by giving the Nigerian government powers that it absolutely should not have. I think that there are certain powers that you only give to a government or to an institution when it has historically demonstrated that it has the capacity to wield those powers in a responsible way. You don't want to go and give a Muhammadu Buhari government the power to police what you can and cannot say on the internet, right? So in the UK, for example, there are laws, very stringent laws actually, surrounding cyberbullying, surrounding things you can and cannot say, things surrounding. So, for example, in the UK, if you make statements that are judged to be trying to incite racial hatred or a race riot or something of that nature, that is classified as a crime. You can go to prison for that. Now, I don't really have a problem with that being the case in the UK because you can be sure to a very large extent that the UK government and the institution responsible for investigating and enforcing such laws will use that power responsibly in the UK because the UK has a very long tradition as a democratic entity. Not the case in Nigeria, where democracy, as far as we know it, only came into being in 1999. So you have to be very careful when you are giving these powers to a Nigerian state. Maybe in another decade or so, we can revisit this conversation when it feels like Nigeria is becoming a more mature democratic state. But presently, we are not there yet.
Okay,
I'm
David.
sure it will be less than a decade, David. I'm trying to be optimistic. It will be less than a decade.
So the thing now is, how do you juxtapose? Because you just mentioned the UK government, considering some things as crime and then taking it up, and we know that they are using the power well. But then here in Nigeria, we do not want to hand over that much power, obviously. But of course, there is still cyberbullying going on. There's still a lot of people out there who feel like they're powerful because they're behind their screen and they just say whatever they want to say. So how do we balance this? How do we regulate this? If we do not want to give the power out completely, how do we regulate what people say and do on social media?
Unfortunately, the use of the word regulate kind of defeats that question because I don't think that's what we should be trying to do. We should be trying to be doing. I don't think we should be trying to regulate what people can and cannot say. What I do think, however, is that the platforms that people make these statements on, so platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, the social media platforms that we use, they perhaps could do more. They could be a bit more sensitive to the unique situation that countries like Nigeria are in. They should perhaps understand that if they don't want to end up in a situation like Twitter was in for the past several months, where you get hit by a ban or something, because the government uses what is happening on your platform as an excuse to ban you, then perhaps they need to be more proactive in content moderation. So I would suggest that it's the platforms themselves that need to pay a closer eye to the content that is coming from the global south, from the third world. Right? Maybe in the developed world, you can leave that to the governments there because those governments have the capacity, as I mentioned, the UK government, for example. But I think in places like Nigeria, I think it's platforms like Twitter themselves that need to become a bit more proactive in terms of getting an understanding of exactly what the landscape is here. What exactly are the things that people say here that can cause problems? Like what exactly is cyberbullying in a Nigerian context? I feel as if these platforms, obviously, most of them come from San Francisco. They are skewed naturally toward the sort of American cultural context. So there are lots of things that fly under the radar here. These platforms aren't able to enforce properly because they don't even know. So, for example, if you say something that can cause a real problem, but you say it in a language that Twitter doesn't understand, like say in Yoruba or something, it will just completely fly under the radar. Twitter is not going to flag you or anything. Even if someone should report your tweet, there is every possibility that you will still get away with it simply because you didn't say it in English. So I think these are the things that the platforms need to look into. They need to hire more local people from such parts of the world. They need to invest in sort of AI that can do better with language recognition in these parts of the world, and invest more in policy enforcement in these parts of the world, so that you don't leave space for incompetent governments to come in and try to flex their muscles.
Right. Okay, so David, you mentioned in the report we just saw earlier that you, as an individual, have gone through countless cyberbullying, and you still mentioned it now. So let's bring that up. Having gone through this cyberbullying number of times, how do you handle social media bullies?
So the first thing that I had to learn was to set a restriction for myself, a time restriction for myself. So, for example, things like screen time, I have a set amount of screen time every day. And if I've hit my limits for screen time, then I'm going off social media. I'm finding something else to do with my time. That was the first thing. I don't have to be connected and online 24/7. I don't need to constantly drink in the world 24/7. I can choose to protect myself by staying away for some time. right? And then the second thing I learned was it's not everything that you have to take at face value. People say a lot of things online because they're trying to get a rise out of you, because they're trying to get a reaction, because it makes them feel powerful for a variety of reasons, things that they probably wouldn't dare to say to you in person. So if you see something that is calculated to get that reaction out of you, you don't have to give the person that reaction. One of the most useful features that exists on most social media platforms is the ability to block people. So you don't necessarily have to let something get a reaction that is calculated to get out of you. You can just block, delete, hide, mute. There are several things you can do to get negativity out of your way. There's absolutely no shame in that. I think one of the more toxic ideas that has somehow come to exist in the social media world is that if you restrict people's ability to interact with you, or you restrict how much you interact with people, somehow that means you have lost the game. Like social media is this big video game, and you've somehow lost. If you are not the one who gets the last word in or something, it's a lie. It's not true. You don't have to get the last word in. You can just block and move on and find more productive things to do with your time. There's no prize for constantly engaging with people if you don't actually want to. So those are like the two major things. I set a time restriction for myself, screen time, social media time, and then I learned how to just block things out, how to read beyond what is there, see the person who is behind the post and not necessarily the post, and then react based on that instead of just constantly getting riled up, constantly getting angry. Because no matter how strong or how resilient you think you are, if you're constantly drinking in this stream of negativity, this stream of negative energy, it is going to affect you eventually.
From this response, I can imagine that your basket of blocked and deleted people is pressed down, shaken together, and running over by now. But I'd like to ask very quickly, in cases where you've had to respond to certain comments certain maybe derogatory comments that have been made to you by bullies or by trolls, what kind of responses did you give before eventually maybe blocking or deleting? But what kind of responses did you give?
So this is for me personally. This doesn't work for everybody because people's minds work differently. How I tend to do it is my personal rule is that if what you give is proportionate to what you receive, then it's banter, then it's fair. If somebody gave you 2 and you give the person 5, then you can probably call that bullying, which is where you.
So in Nigerian
so
terms,
how I tend to do it is if you insult me, well, I'm probably gonna insult you back. The mistake would be to think that there's genuine venom behind the insult. Not from my end anyway, because I understand that this is what people do on the internet.
For clout, yeah.
I also think one of the reasons that we have this issue in Nigeria is because the internet came into Nigeria relatively late. We came online generally about 10 years after the rest of the world. So these issues we're only coming to terms with them now, whereas people in other parts of the world have had message boards and social media since the early noughties. So we have already had that experience. We already know how these things go. We've been through places like 4chan and Reddit. We've seen real nastiness. So whatever is going to happen on Facebook or Twitter, we generally understand that human beings are just human beings. Wherever people see anonymity and they think that the things they say can't be traced to them, they say all sorts of crazy things. So I think the most important thing is to understand that you don't have to take everything to the head, that you don't have to take everything at face value. People say a lot of crazy things on there, but they're saying it because they think they can get away with it and not because it's actually something that should necessarily get to you. You don't have to let it have that power over you. It's just
David,
people talk.
Okay, so David, now you mentioned that the rest of the world has, had access to, the social media, the internet generally before we did. But even in, all around the world, there is this impact that it has, that's cyberbullying on people. And a lot of people seem to, water down the effect. So do you think that cyberbullying has an impact on mental health? And this is a very important issue because many people just want to do it for clout, like you mentioned. They don't know what other people suffer from just the things they say to them.
Yes, it definitely does have an impact on mental health. And if the recipient isn't well versed enough in internet culture or isn't mentally resilient enough to pick themselves up, it's been known to lead to things like suicide attempts. So it absolutely does have an effect on mental health. So which is where, as I said, the platforms themselves need to do more in terms of policy enforcement, because there's always this this balancing act between respect for free speech and necessary censorship. Because obviously there's no such thing as absolute free speech,
Freedom, yes.
right? Which is why it's illegal to shout fire in the crowded theater. We know that. But it's always a huge balancing act, because wherever you leave people to their own devices. So the perfect example of this is 4chan, which is like a forum that has pretty much no moderation whatsoever. It has no censorship whatsoever. And you will see some of the very worst things on the internet there, right? That's what human beings do where there are no rules. So there have to be rules. There has to be enforcement of rules. There has to be some measure of censorship. However, in pursuit of that limited measure of censorship, so as to make the platform fit for civilized human society, it's also key that you don't forget that at the end of the day, it's not possible to legislate righteousness into people's hearts, right? Human beings are what human beings are. So you do it up to a point, and then you also have to trust that people too, at some point, should sort of imbibe some kind of basic decency, should be able to, you can't enforce things like empathy, right? You can't enforce abstract thinking. You can't enforce those things with your platform T&Cs. People either have it or they don't. So yes, it absolutely does have an impact on mental health. But I think what governments, what platforms can do is only up to a point anyway. At the end of the day, it still comes down to the people that use these websites, the people that use these platforms. We ourselves, and I'm not excluding myself from this, everybody who uses social media needs to be very honest with themselves about what it is that they aim to achieve with the way they interact, with the things they say there. Ultimately, there has to be a measure of personal responsibility.
Definitely. David, before you go, I think we have 1 minute to spare. And in that 1 minute, I'd like you to quickly respond to this. What do you think could be the right measures to be taken on people who go onto the cyberspace and bully others and issue out threats? For example, we saw death threats to some of the Nigerian footballers. Some even went tribalistic, saying, Madoka Okoye, that's the Nigerian goalkeeper, because he's Igbo, is why, he couldn't do well in goalpost. I don't see what that has to do with anything. But people threatened them, and then the Kamara, the other player, his house, they threatened to burn down his house. He had to take police security to ensure that his family and the house was secure. So very quickly, yes, like you have mentioned, the companies should do some kind of control on these platforms. But what can be done? What should be done to the perpetrators of this act to deter others from, going in that direction, knowing that this could actually affect the mental health of victims?
So I think in cases like that, where things that in other parts of the world can be classified as speech crimes take place on the platform, the company actually has access to certain bits of user data, which could potentially be used to identify the user. So I think there might be like a 1 or 2 strike system that you do this once, you get a warning, and then maybe you do it again, and the company submits those details maybe to the relevant institution of state, or finds a way to put it up publicly somewhere. Because I feel as if internet anonymity is good up to a point, but it also creates the conditions for people to feel like they are powerful in an unaccountable way, because nobody knows who you are. You can just say absolutely anything, which I don't think is a good thing for the concept of an evolved, civilized human society. So I think the platforms shouldn't be shy. Even in places like Nigeria, platforms shouldn't be shy if it calls for it, to pass across the details of such people to the authorities. If you're threatening someone with physical harm, for example, I don't think even if it isn't illegal in Nigeria, I don't think the platform should have a problem with passing across whatever details it has on you to some kind of enforcement team to do something about it. People like that need to be outed, right? In my own personal space, I do things like that where people come and say just absolutely like really nasty things to me, and then I go dig into the handle behind it, I find out the person, and I go put up your picture next to the post or something.
Right.
It's not the nicest thing to do, but I find that it's effective. Once people realize that what they post can be traced back to the person who posted it and that they are not completely unaccountable, their standard of behavior increases. So I think platforms should make it clear that you are anonymous-ish. You are not completely anonymous. So the day you overdo it, the day you overstep, and the day you threaten to cause physical harm to someone, or the day you actually cause physical harm to someone, your anonymity is not going to be anonymous.
It's going to be all right. Thank you so much, David, for joining us once again. You clearly have broken down this conversation. There's more to talk about, but we have to leave it here because of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Very quickly, Blessings. You are a celebrity on social media with thousands of followers. Have you ever been bullied?
See that coming?
Yeah, have you ever
But really, to be honest, I feel whether I'm not a celebrity anyway, but
I will not tell out how many thousands of followers you have on Instagram, but
well, you can follow me to find out.
I won't follow
Well,
you.
the thing is, I think that celebrity or not, everybody has experienced cyberbullying in one way or another. I mean, a few years ago, it's only when you post maybe a picture on your page that, people will refer to you. But now, even in comment sections, all these blogs, you just go there and drop a very genuine, honest comment. Like maybe you see a picture and you like it, and then and someone from nowhere just starts calling you names. And then you're like, who is this person? Like, did I offend you before? So everybody has received that, like you said earlier, gbasgbos, like stray bullets anywhere. Like you just...
I mean, I receive it in the office sometimes.
Right.
You know?
You just drop a comment, an innocent comment, and then because people don't subscribe to your own opinion, they feel like the only way to go about it is to lash out on you. And like I said, it's really toxic and it's scary because now there are a lot of, ghost Instagrammers.
I was going there, because David did mention that, the owners of these, of these platforms can actually, after maybe 1 warning, 2 warnings, submit critical information of these users to appropriate authorities.
Right.
But in cases where people use pseudo accounts, people go with different names, different pictures, and all of that, it makes it more difficult to track or trace down perpetrators of this particular act.
It does. And I also see, unfortunately, that even when it comes to cyberbullying, people don't exactly, like journalism, you have to dig deep to know the truth. But sadly, on social media, they don't care. They say in Pidgin, the first person we talk, that's the person telling the truth. I'm sorry, I'm not very fluent at that. But when someone comes out, maybe with your name or your picture, say you're a businessman, and then they just claim that you swindled them, everybody comes to your page and starts bombarding you with insults without and then it's affecting you mentally. Sometimes a lot of people, so imagine what these actual celebrities are going through because they're swallowing a lot of this every day. Although one thing David said that I really agree with is you have to, you have to know, you have to, what's the word? Just know how many minutes you spend on social media. Social media is not real life. So regulate it. That's the word. Don't just, because you're going to be doing more harm to yourself.
Then good. That's a good way to end it. Now we will go on a very quick break. If we can quickly take our forecast for the week to come. After this break, we'll be bringing you what we suspect will be the top stories on the continent of Africa in the coming week. Do stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. And if you are just joining us, sadly, you have missed a huge chunk of the show as we are now on the home stretch of Report Desk Africa for this week. The last one for the very long month of January. Whew. Anyways, forecast for the week, what we are expecting to see. Now, Nigerian government suspends its planned removal of fuel subsidy. There's been a back and forth whether subsidy has been removed or whether it has not been removed. But now we hear that the government has decided to suspend the planned removal for another 18 months. Provisions have been made for subsidy payments to marketers in the 2022 budget, and the provision was made as a sequel to the passage of the Petroleum Industries Act, which indicated that all petroleum products will be deregulated. Senate President Ahmed Lawan appealed to the organized labor unions to suspend their planned protests or demonstrations.
Also on forecast, we have the Mali's crisis. That's a story on Mali, where we know now that Mali's military government demands Denmark to immediately withdraw its security forces. Also, France and European allies urge Mali to let Danish troops stay. Malian's Prime Minister Maiga says foreign forces must seek agreement before deploying.
And finally, from west, we move to the east, well, at least for next week. And we're looking at the Ethiopian unrest and the upcoming negotiations on a ceasefire between the Ethiopian government and the rival Tigray forces. Also, international mediation efforts continue amid one of the worst humanitarian crises we've seen recently. We'll be bringing you these updates in the coming week. Blessings, it has been an interesting show, definitely.
Oh, it really has. And one thing that caught my attention is the fuel subsidy. I mean, I read somewhere where someone says it always is impossible in every country, especially in Africa, for the government to reduce subsidy, for the government to bring up the fuel subsidy in times like this, because during election campaigns, there's usually trust deficit between the government and the citizens. So we don't know how true that is. We're going to find out.
Definitely, we're going to find out. Thank you so much for staying with us again on another interesting and exciting episode of Report Desk Africa. Till we meet again next week, hopefully. My name is Bernard Akede.
And I remain Blessings Masugu.
Yeah, your French has improved.